It is very important that the churches we are in are valid churches. So what exactly makes a church valid? We're going to talk about that today. Hello everyone, I'm Landon Reynolds and I am a confirmed American Baptist. And today we are going to be continuing my series that I started last week before I got sick on why the church must be institutional and why those institutions that constitute the church must be valid in some sense. So today we are going to begin the next episode and discuss what makes the church valid. So, from the beginning, Christ established one church, and it was institutional. Watch my last video for more on why the church must be institutional in general, because that's what we talked about last week. So today we are going to talk about how to determine if the church you are in is valid institutionally. So, Christ prayed that and wills that the church he established remained one institution. And as such, being the one guilty of a schism is a grave sin. And a schism is a split in the church. So anytime one institution splits from another, the one that caused the split is the schismatic. So, Christians throughout history have disagreed about how grave a sin it is. There were two main views among the church fathers. You had St. Augustine, who said that churches that are in schism are in serious error and that the schism is wrong, but at the end of the day, they're still valid churches. And then you had the other view, St. Cyprian's view. And his view was that schism is rejecting Christ's church outright, which is just as bad as heresy, so rejecting the essential tenets of the faith. So that those who are in invalid churches are outside of the church, and traditionally outside of salvation and damned. So, because you can't have God as your father without the church as your mother, is his famous quote. And I generally agree with him. I take more of a Cyprian view than an Augustinian view. I think if one willfully causes a schism or attends a schismatic church while knowing that the church is schismatic and has the ability to attend a non-schismatic church but refuses to for whatever reason, he is normally outside of salvation. And I already hear, well, I thought you're a Protestant. I thought you believed in sola fide. I already hear that coming. Yes, I do believe in sola fide, and this works with sola fide because it's kind of like baptism. It works the same way. Baptism is a necessary fruit of the Spirit, but your faith is still what saves you. So if you're trying to live for God and you believe the essentials of the faith, and you don't know that you're committing the sin of schism, or you aren't convinced that your church is invalid and that you're committing the sin of schism, your faith will still save you. But the minute you do know that you're in an invalid church, your faith, if it is real saving faith, will compel you to attend a valid church as soon as you are able to. And if not, you likely don't have saving faith. So, that of course brings up the main question that we're going to be answering in this video today. What constitutes a valid church? Well, a valid church must have or be in communion with a church that has direct institutional apostolic succession to the apostles, with no schisms in their history in which they were the guilty party. So apostolic succession, when Christ established the church, he gave the apostles authority over the church, and then they passed down that authority to the next generation, and they passed it down, through ministers and bishops, all the way down to our ministers today. So in a valid church, the ministers would have authority conveyed upon them by somebody who had their authority given to them, such and such and so on and so forth, going all the way back to the apostles. So that's apostolic succession, and that is necessary to have the license to teach in a church, and that is a necessary component of a valid church. So anyway, back to schism. If a church has schisms in their history where it was their fault, then they are an invalid church, because schism is just as bad as heresy. So the one who causes the schism is the one guilty of the schism. So if the church excommunicates an individual or a group for having differing beliefs, as long as those beliefs are in the bounds of Christian orthodoxy, and that group is forced to start a new church, or if they get to keep their church, the church that has excommunicated them, from the church that has excommunicated them, if they get to keep their property and they continue operating it as a church, they are the valid church, and the church that excommunicated them are the schismatics, and the new church is the valid church that preserves continuity, because the old church committed the sin of schism. So the new church preserves the institutional heritage of the unbroken line of valid authority. But if the group were to leave and start a new church without being excommunicated, they would be the schismatics, and the church that they left, the old church, remains the valid church. So this leads to the question, when is it okay to disagree with your church? And 9 times out of 10, the church is right and you're wrong. Because the people leading the institutional church are often some of the most educated people in the entirety of the church. You, being a layperson, are oftentimes not nearly qualified to be disagreeing with them. So 9 times out of 10, you can trust that they are right and you are wrong if you disagree, and that is good. But it is okay to disagree with the church if the church is teaching heresy. So what is heresy? It would be denying the Trinity, denying who God is. And the reason why that is the heresy line is just common sense and reason. Because you can't have the same religion if you worship a different God, and you can't have salvation if you don't have faith in the real Christ. So some other reasons why you might be in disagreement with your church is if you are convicted by conscience that what they're teaching is wrong, and it would cause you to deny conscience to submit to their teaching. So, if you are convicted that what they are teaching is wrong to an extent where it would deny your conscience to submit to their teachings, you should believe what you believe and not submit to their teachings. And then the other reason why you can disagree with your church is if you are intellectually convinced after extensive study on the subject that they are wrong beyond a reasonable doubt. Then you can disagree with your church. And this should not be a regular occurrence. Maybe 1 to 2 doctrines max that you disagree with your church on. But you should be in submission to your church's authority. And normatively, you should trust that they are correct and obey what they say about various doctrines, because they're more likely to be right than you are most of the time. And if you do disagree with your church, you should respectfully discuss it with the leadership and your minister, with an open mind, willing to be corrected. So it's very important that you submit to your church's authority. I think this is where I'm going to stop today, because if you can't tell, I'm a little frazzled. I can't focus. There were probably a couple cuts in that video because there's a lot going on outside, and I'm just getting distracted. And I think I covered about what I wanted to cover today. So yeah, make sure you're in a valid church. Don't schism. Trust the authority of your ministers and submit to them. That's pretty much the message for today. If you have an opinion different from mine, or if you disagree with any of the takes I gave in this video, feel free to leave a comment below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And if you really want to keep the conversation going on this topic, feel free to join my Discord server as well. I will leave a link in the description below if you're interested in that. And if you did enjoy this video and you enjoy my content in general, please feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of the videos I make in the future. But that's going to be about all for me today. That's where I'm going to stop for today. So thank you for joining me. I will see you in my next video. Stay faithful.